The break and continue statements are used to handle the flow of a while or a for loop in a Python program, meaning the programmer can interrupt or restart the execution of a loop structure in certain conditions. Let's start with the break statement, which is used to terminate the loop in which it resides. To show how break works, we will first write a loop. So, for number in range of 10, colon, if number equals 7, and now let's use the break statement inside this if block, and the print number outside the if block, so print number. Okay, what this loop does is it takes each number in the list generated by the range function, so it starts from 0, and compares it to 7, according to the if statement. Since the numbers 0 to 6 do not meet the condition in the if statement, the break statement is not executed for any of them. So Python goes further and prints them, as we can see. When 7 is selected from the list, it is then passed to the if statement, and the condition is evaluated as true. This is where Python goes and executes the indented code below if, where it finds the break statement, which tells it something like this. Stop the execution here, ignore the print statement below, and completely quit this for loop. Because Python completely exits the for loop, the rest of the numbers in the list, meaning 8 and 9, are also ignored, and the Python program keeps executing other code below the for statement, if any. Now what if we have a for loop nested inside another for loop, something like in the previous lecture? Let's first define list1 and list2 again. So we have list1 equals 4, 5, 6, and list2 equals 10, 20, and 30. Now let's write the loop for I in list1, then a nested for loop for j in list2. Inside this nested for loop, we'll have an if statement if j equals 20, then break. Outside the if block, we will keep the print I times j, and then let's say print outside the nested loop. This final print statement will be included actually in the first for loop. Okay, let's run this code. So as we saw in the previous lecture, in this case, Python takes the first element of list1 and tries to multiply it with each element of list2. Then takes the second element of list1 and tries to multiply it with each element of list2, and so on. But in this case, we have the if statement inside the nested for loop and the break statement within this if block. So each time Python tries to multiply the elements of list1 with 20, the second element of list2, the break statement tells it to stop the execution and quit this loop. Remember that the break statement terminates only the execution of the innermost loop, not all loops. So keep this in mind. That's why each time the break statement interrupts the multiplication process, we still receive the outside the nested loop string, because the print outside the nested loop statement is not part of the nested loop itself. Instead, it is part of the outermost loop. One more thing, notice the indentation here. For j in list2 and print outside the nested loop are at the same level of indentation, so keep an eye on this. Now the same principles apply with while loops. We won't get into while loops in this case, just to avoid getting boring. Now let's have a look at the continue statement. When Python finds a continue statement inside a for or a while loop, it ignores the rest of the code below for the current iteration only, then goes up to the top of the loop and starts the next iteration. In order to see this in practice, let's consider the same lists and for loops as earlier, but replace break with continue in our code. So we still have list1 in memory, also list2. Okay. Now using the up arrow key, let's enter for I in list1, for j in list2. Now let's find the if statement, if j equals 20. Now instead of break, let's type in continue, so continue. Okay. We will use the same print, I times j, and the same print outside the nested loop. at the first level of indentation. Okay, let's run this code. So let's study the result of this code to understand what happened. Python did the same thing here. It took the first element of list 1 and tried to multiply it with the first element of list 2 and succeeded. So we got 40 as a result. Then Python tried to multiply 4 with 20. But since 20 satisfies the condition in the if statement, the program executes the continue statement, which actually ignores the rest of the code in this loop, and that's why we won't see 80 as a result. After ignoring the multiplication below continue, Python goes to the top of the nested loop and extracts the next element from list 2, which is 30. And that's why we see 120 in the result. Finally, after list 2 is exhausted, Python goes and executes the print outside the nested loop statement, which is part of the outermost for loop. So it isn't affected by the continue statement. Then the program repeats the same steps for the next two elements of list 1. As with break, the same principles apply to while loops when speaking about the continue statement. Finally, let's talk about the pass statement. Pass is the equivalent of do nothing. It is actually a placeholder when you just want to write a piece of code that you will treat later, but you don't want to forget to add it into your code. So let's see a short example of this. Let's say for I in range of 10, colon, and then just type in pass. So this code does nothing, as I said, but what if you just don't write anything below the for statement? What if you just skip the pass statement? Let's see it. Let's use the same for I in range 10 and just type nothing. So we got an indentation error, expected unindented block. Python throws an error because the code is invalid if you don't type anything inside the for loop. This is the reason we need the pass statement. Okay, I think we covered enough in this lecture, so let's go further to exceptions.